two things. The first is that it's International Fight Week, so happy International Fight Week to everyone. The second thing is that I actually got a head start on doing my predictions for this week, so I think I'm going to upload on Tuesday, you guys. UFC 317 is happening this Saturday, June 28th, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Topuria versus Oliveira. Without a doubt, this card is like, okay, this is the biggest main event of the year. I can't think of anything that rivals this. Ankalaev versus Pereira was a big one because of the knockout that might have been produced by Alex Pereira that didn't come. If this ends up being a stinker fight, then we'll be able to look back at everything that's happened this year. And we got fights like Imavov versus Adesanya, or Strickland versus Duplessis 2, or Merab versus O'Malley 2, which ended up being great fights, but nobody was really hyped for them, particularly going into it. This is a really hype matchup. Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Topuria, man. This is straight out of UFC 5. Before we go through the picks, we're going to take a visit to the canceled fight graveyard. This will be a new segment for each of the different card breakdowns that I go through. As I was going home from work, I had finished this presentation, and one of the slides was Cedric Dumas versus Jackson McVey, an LFA prospect that they signed. Cedric Dumas, man, I don't know what's going on with that cat. He was hiding in a dog crate, getting chased out of the bando by the cops. He might just still be stuck in the trap house right now, and that's the reason why he can't fight. This really does suck that he has to sit out of a card that's as big as this one, but Jackson McVey is going to stay on this event. He is going to be fighting another prospect coming out of Fury FC named Chris Ewert. Paulo Costa at number 13 versus Roman Kopylov at number 14 has been scrapped for this card. It'll be moved to UFC 318. That card is going to be headlined by Dricus and Chimaev, so this will be nice middleweight violence to pair with that. I don't know who else is on the card, but I'll take a closer look at it as we get closer. I may just let it be a surprise because I've seen some videos of people being like, this card is weak, so I might just wait until the week of the predictions to see everything and everyone who's on the card because, I don't want to spoil it for myself if they're telling the truth. The first fight that we're going to talk about is going to be Niko Price versus Jacobe Smith. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever played the game Skyrim before, but there's this one mission where you go to this dark elf cult and you have to bring your followers to sacrifice at the Shrine of Boethia to get the ebony blade. What I'm driving at here is Niko Price is like one of the follower companions that you recruit in Skyrim to go sacrifice at this altar in order to get this sword. And the cool sword that absorbs health, he has a different name in the UFC. His name is Jacobe Smith. This is what we unlock for sacrificing Niko Price. Alright, so this is what I'm thinking, right? Oban Elliott is a contender who we were touting to be something, and he just lost to Sukyan Koi in a very uneventful decision where he got dominated in the wrestling. He took Preston Parsons to a unanimous decision where he won with his grappling. Preston Parsons got sparked in one round by Jacobe Smith, though, so what I'm thinking about this is that Jacobe Smith is significantly better at striking than Oban Elliott is, and he knocked out Basil Hafez, who had a really good fight with JDM. MMA math is all screwed up, but one thing that we have to do whenever the MMA math doesn't check out is just look at the styles. You got to watch the fights, and you got to be like, okay, how does this guy like to fight? How does this guy like to fight? Then we'll make our call. So Niko Price, he likes to get into bar fights. He is a Darren Elkins style fighter, and he likes the close range, not necessarily clinching, but he'll hang out in clinches. He'll get knocked out in a clinch, as we saw with Robbie Lawler. Jacobe is the master of the clinching range. In collar ties, he'll land some good shots and he'll get you on the retreat, and that's whenever he'll lunge in with his straight punches. I think he knocked out Preston Parsons with something like this. Or like firing a lead hook off of a straight punch that he lunged into after he had crashed into the clinching range. If you're a kickboxer, Jacobe Smith is a nightmare matchup for you because he's just going to crowd your kicking range with his punches. This is walk him down Jacobe. This is the style of fight that I thought that Jamal Hill was going to bring to Khalil Roundtree, the way that Jacobe fights every single time that he's in the octagon. Niko Price was knocked out by Robbie Lawler, as I just mentioned. If you're a serious guy in the UFC and that was his retirement fight, the last time that we ever saw Robbie Lawler, it was a brutal knockout over Niko Price. How is that happening to you, my boy? And further breaking down styles, Price's fight with Phil Rowe, where they went life and death, and Niko Price ends up getting TKO'd in the third round, and they're both gassed, and none of them have sting on their shots. It's just Niko Price couldn't last it anymore. This type of fight would be impossible for Jacobe to get into because he's just too powerful. In that type of brawl, Jacobe Smith is going to end up knocking out Niko Price on accident. The nail in the coffin for Niko Price is the fact that he's lost to Thimba Garimbo in October 2024, and that would be his last outing. So Smith is going to win this fight. I should just say round 1 KO, but just to be safe, round 2 KO. And that's going to be my prediction for this first match to get us going on the early prelims of this event. The next fight is going to be Jhonata Diniz versus Alvin Hines. I suppose I didn't feature Jhonata Diniz's fallen through matchup with Justin Tafa inside of the cancelled matchup graveyard. I may use video magic to put it there and just act like it was purposeful this whole time. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Anyways, the guy that he's going to be fighting, his name is going to be Alvin Hines. His fighter nickname is Goozy. I generally don't hate LFA prospects, though. If you do remember, Alex Pereira came from LFA. We got Derek Lewis from LFA. We got Dominic Reyes from LFA. And he came straight to the UFC and fought John Jones whenever he was on a crazy win streak in that promotion. So Ozzy Diaz is another guy who came out of here. He got knocked out by Minying Zhang, but I mean, he's okay. He's been doing all right. Jhonata Diniz was humiliated by Marcin Tybura. Hines covers for Junior Tafa, who had to pull out, which that would have been a much better fight. Jhonata Diniz, he has vulnerability to being punched in his face, and he's not a special human for this, but he does have deficiencies whenever it comes to ground and pound defense and striking defense. He does have lapses in judgment and positioning whenever he is in spots to protect himself or to take damage. He usually chooses the latter. We're breaking down a matchup that's no longer going to happen. Alvin Hines, he's miserable. I watch his fights on Fight Pass. He's in better shape than most heavyweights, but he's one of these light hybrid dudes where he's not insanely tall, and he's just like 240 pounds, 235 pounds. He's not going to be as heavy as they come. It really does count for little that he has a Spivak build, because if you're not going to be an insanely technical fighter and you're going to be one of these hybrid builds, you might as well just be fat, dude, if we're being honest. This is a guy who they picked up just so Jhonata Diniz could get some work for this night because Junior Tafa pulled out and he probably wanted to make some money still. Alvin Hines, he looks like Ryback. I'm not sure if you guys remember the WWE wrestler Ryback. Alvin Hines, he favors him a lot. So yeah, this is it, guys. This is what getting the heavyweight division going looks like. Jhonata Diniz versus Alvin Hines. Both have beached well BJJ. Alvin just doesn't look like he can do anything right, so that's the reason why I'm going to select Jhonata Diniz to actually get this fight to the ground and win via round 1 TKO. Or he'll drop this goober, this goozy, and then he'll just mount and TKO from there. The one that was featured in the graveyard, Cedric Dumas, is out of this one. It's Jackson McVey versus Chris Ewert at middleweight. There's been some new UFC signs from all different types of promotions lately. McVey is a 6-0 middleweight from LFA again. He's 6'3" and has some okay kickboxing. Chris Ewert, Chris Zuniga, I looked up Christopher Zuniga because that's what his Instagram handle said, but I could only find clips of him fighting or a Tapology under Chris Ewert that was accurate. They call him El Tanque. He's another Chilean, and I think that he may very well replace Bahamundez, who we just saw took a pretty bad loss to Fazeev. This guy may be the new Chilean finisher in the UFC. That boy Jackson McVey, he hasn't been in a real fight yet, but he has great finishing instincts against the LFA scum that he has been fighting. Ewert, on the other hand, though, he came out of Fury FC. This is a promotion that birthed athletes like Joshua Van. Fury FC is actually a good fight organization. I'm sure if we did some more digging, we could find other fighters or other guys who are more tapped in than me. You guys probably know of other fighters who came out of Fury FC. Please let me know in the comments if you do know any of those guys. But Chris Ewert has fought with other people who look like serious MMA fighters. Jackson McVey's last fight, it was a KO over this guy who didn't look like a for real dude. He was big and blown up for 185. Chris Ewert was in there fighting with this undefeated prospect and then another guy who was 5-2, and the 5-2 guy and the undefeated prospect both tried to wrestle him. The 5-0 guy, he went to a decision with that person, and he won a unanimous decision, Chris Ewert. It was just a lot of clinching. Chris Ewert is a strong fighter. One of the advantages that McVey would have had over Cedric Dumas was the fact that he had a larger and more solid frame than Cedric. That's probably just because of all the lean sipping that he does. Chris Ewert seems to have a stronger build than Jackson McVey, all things considered, and that is going to translate into better punch power for him. I would say Ewert is more prepared for this moment. Like Jacobe Smith, he's going to be another master of the clinch range, but instead of like the collar ties, he's actually in the Muay Thai clinch, working elbows and punches out of it, and knees too. He's very lethal with his. He may take the wind right out of Jackson McVey, just clinching him and then throwing knees, and I think that this is going to be a process drawn out over 2 rounds, but ultimately he's going to score a KO. It's going to be a nice intro to who Chris Ewert is, I believe, personally. So that's who I'm going to select. Beautiful knockout highlight from him. Speaking of beautiful knockout highlight, I like how they built this card. It doesn't have the best names on it, but these are fighters, or fights rather, that will end in knockouts. Terrance McKinney versus Viacheslav Borshchev in lightweight. Man, I love Terrance McKinney, and I really believe in his career resurgence a lot. They had to buy Terrance McKinney back from the shop like Warzone after he was knocked out by Bonfim, Dober, Ribovic, and Sadikov. But if you really do look at that lineup of the people that have beaten him, maybe Bonfim is a cheeky one. But the only reason why I think that that's not the best loss is because he was sauced up by another guy who beat him too. So these are all elite level strikers, and you can safely say that. As far as experience benefits anyone here, Terrance McKinney is much more primed for stand-up battles in the UFC than Viacheslav Borshchev just because of who he's fought in the past. Viacheslav Borshchev has had fights with guys like Chase Hooper, and he has the advantage of fighting with good grapplers. But he has a shared loss to Nazim Sadikov, and Chase Hooper did him bad. And if we look at how things have been going for both of these guys too, Borshchev's last fight was a loss to Tom Nolan by unanimous decision. McKinney's last fight was a KO over Dadmir Hadzovic. So instead of paying attention to the losses, I'm paying attention to the fact that he's trying to get things back on track. Before, this guy has gotten wins over Faraz Ziem, Matt Frivola, Mike Breeden. Terrance McKinney has some good competition, and in his fights, they're always super violent, and he's either KOing someone or he's getting KO'd. Borshchev stalls, and he went to a draw with Sadikov, and also a split decision with Lontop. McKinney won't allow this. He's not just going to let Viacheslav Borshchev occupy dead space in the octagon without having punches or kicks to worry about, or some type of offense. Terrance McKinney is a lethal striker. He is going to prove his lethality in this fight by knocking out Viacheslav Borshchev in round 1. So that's what I'm going to select to happen here. The next fight is going to be Viviane Araujo at number 8 versus Tracy Cortez at number 10. This is a women's flyweight fight. Of all the different matchups that I broke down, I was driving home thinking about how unconfident I was in this one. I really don't know what's going to happen here. WMMA is so hard to predict. Of all the certainty that I have in all the other picks that I make, literally all of them, whenever I come to a consensus after doing the research, I'm usually like, okay, this is how it's going to go. I really have no idea how this fight plays out. But one thing that I do know for sure is that Rose has the worst fights ever. Cortez versus Namajunas was a disaster, and it made both fighters look horrible. I bet you don't even remember it. I can't specifically think of anything Cortez does exceptionally well. Maybe the boxing sometimes, but Rose showed Cortez how average she was in that fight, which was 1 year ago, and Tracy hasn't fought since. Tracy likely does come out and get wrestled is what I'm thinking, but she was able to win a fight against Jasmine Jasudavicius in 2023, and that was before she started her run, and that's the reason why I'm second guessing this pick so much, is because Araujo may do more than lay and pray, but Cortez's striking in that fight actually didn't look bad, and it's comparable to Amanda Hebus's, and she decisioned Araujo. But Viviane has gone through rounds with Natalie Silva without getting finished, so she may get torched in the stand-up, but Cortez isn't stopping that takedown is what I'm thinking. So Araujo via decision, and this is on super low confidence, but who can confidently predict WMMA fights anyways, man? I guess I just need to join the club. So that'll take us on to the next fight. Hyder Amil versus Jose Delgado. Even this fight, which is actually 50-50, I have a better idea of who wins than the last one. This fight is going to be tooth and nail, and I'm excited to watch this because these are two prospects that I was tracking the returns of, and I had no idea that they were fighting each other at UFC 317. So after a debut versus Connor Matthews, the reason why I was excited for the return of Jose Delgado is because he beat the life out of this man. And that's not an exceptionally great win. Yadier Del Valle, Yadier Del Valle is the guy who made his UFC debut against Connor Matthews and he knocked him out. And then he gave his best rounds to Denis Bazookia, Connor Matthews did. And that was at the beginning of his career in his own debut. So he got knocked out in the third round of that fight. And he got knocked out by Jose Delgado. And then he got knocked out by Yadier Deval. So I'm not really sure if that's much of an accomplishment for our boy Jose Delgado. He showed a really sick set of skills in this fight. And that's the reason why I was excited to watch him come back. Hyder Amil, though, we know him because that's the guy who unleashed the 80-punch combo on Jungyong Lee. I think that's his name. This is a dude. This guy beat William Gomez in France, and he was stuffing shots while working his boxing, which rocks. His boxing is amazing. Delgado took him out over Connor Matthew in his debut, and he ground and pounded his face in with elbows. Delgado showed some really nice skills on the feet. I think a spinning elbow landed in this fight. He also took mount over Connor Matthews after dropping him. Delgado trains with MMA Lab. This is Benson Henderson's gym, and it does suck that we're going to lose some hype on someone here. Hyder Amil has been my boy forever, though. One of my first big uploads was UFC fighters who have a fight style similar to Dricus du Plessis. And Hyder Amil was my selection in that video for 145. This may be a tough fight for Hyder Amil, but he's more prepared from past scheduling, I would say. Gomez would have gotten baked if he didn't grapple so much against Hyder. And that's just a testament of how good his striking is. So Hyder Amil is going to win this fight via TKO in the second round. And that's my prediction. Next, we're on to Jack Hermanson versus Gregory Rodrigues. Watching Jack Hermanson fight is like seeing a shooting star. And this is a guy who beats up middleweight contenders / prospects that the UFC just doesn't have any plans for. Gregory Rodrigues is coming off of a loss to Jared Cannonier, so nothing really makes sense for him. Have him fight Jack Hermanson. And that actually does kind of make sense. If you're within like the top 10 to 15 rankings or just outside of the rankings, it always makes sense for you to fight Jack Hermanson, no matter what's going on in the middleweight division. But what I'm thinking is Jack Hermanson may not have any power here because Gregory Rodrigues is too seasoned of a veteran. And even though he did lose via TKO to Jared Cannonier in his last fight, he almost finished Jared Cannonier in several moments of this fight. And his striking is a lot like Marvin Vettori's. I would say that he's like a Brazilian Marvin Vettori. And if we are on the topic of styles make fights, which I mean, this is all that I'm considering whenever I'm making these predictions, even though losses to fighters like Bruno Ferreira or Jared Cannonier make it seem like Greg isn't that serious, I think that Gregory will be too hulking and physical to get controlled by Hermanson for any significant portion of time. Even though Joe Pyfer does have a large frame and he is a strong person, he's not big, you know? He's not like a massive guy, like width-wise as well as like center of gravity. You can pick his ankles. Gregory Rodrigues, it's like he's made out of wood. I don't think that he's just going to be able to get ragdolled by Jack Hermanson. And I don't think that he'll be bothered much or be unable to reverse positions against Jack Hermanson in the clinch where he's just being worn on by the weight of Jack over the course of however many rounds this fight lasts. I think that it will go all three though. Ultimately, I do believe that Gregory Rodrigues will win a decision. We saw him taper off in the later rounds with Jared Cannonier. I don't think he's conditioned for 25 minutes. I think that 15 minutes definitely suits his fight style a lot more. He'll be able to get this done with good output. Low output fighters usually get schooled by Jack Hermanson. I think that Gregory Rodrigues at least punches people more than Joe Pyfer does, based off of what we saw in both of their last fights. That Kelvin Gastelum fight was so snoozy after the first, whenever he didn't knock him out. I don't know how Kelvin Gastelum doesn't get knocked out. Like, how does he not get knocked out? Like, that's the eighth wonder of the world. How Joe Pyfer can land a flush left hook on the chin of Kelvin Gastelum and he doesn't go to sleep. I don't understand it. The next fight is Payton Talbott versus Felipe Lima. Payton Talbott would likely do better than Felipe Lima in a fight with him if he made it into a brawl, but he just doesn't really fight like that. He's very controlled, and he's less willing to make fights crazy by being a wild guy like Miles Johns even, who took this approach trying to blitz in and get the knockout, and he was immediately neutralized by Felipe Lima. Lima has this really interesting style of integrating grappling and striking so that he never experiences discomfort, and he can comfortably win grappling decisions over guys who are very dangerous strikers like Miles Johns. It kind of feels like they want Payton Talbott gone. I'm not really sure if anyone else is feeling that in the way that they've scheduled this fight, in the way that they put him on this card with such short notice. On paper, I don't see how he wins this fight. This is like a more dangerous Raoni Barcelos. Naimov is a sublime striker. He was throwing wheel kicks at Bogdangrad, and he was piecing him up on the feet. And Muhammad Naimov, he's an even better wrestler who was dominated by Lima and submitted in round 3 of their fight. And that was all the grappling. And Payton Talbott can't even keep up with an old man Raoni Barcelos. Since there's like nothing left for him to do, I kind of want to see him get flatlined by this guy or Malcolm Wellmaker. My 9/11 was Valentine's Day 2025 earlier this year in February when Frank Ocean posted with Talbot on that day. And ultimately, bro, like, I guess, like, live and let live, you know? But he couldn't stay ahead of Valentine's Day with Frank Ocean and putting vapes in his butt. It all caught up to him. He couldn't stay ahead of it. And his punishment is going to be Lima subbing him in round 2 again. And hopefully he gets dropped on the feet before it happens. The next fight is going to be a number 1 contender fight in flyweight, Brandon Royval versus Joshua Van at number 12. Joshua Van, he's the can man like Adrian Bronner, and he's proving that anyone can get it. It's inspirational what Joshua Van is doing for this division. We used to talk about abolishing flyweight by the time the Asakura debuted, because there was nobody to challenge for this belt that we hadn't already seen fought Pantoja. Joshua Van, he's the reason why everyone cares about flyweight. And speaking of Wellmaker, Van and Malcolm, they both combo very similarly with their boxing. I noticed that the other day. Joshua Van, he doesn't have the same walk-off KO power like Malcolm Wallmaker packs in a one shot. He does snowball through his boxing, but he can do it really fast. The big difference that I do see in both of their styles is that Malcolm Wallmaker, he has insane footwork, and Joshua Van, he can be a bit plodding, and I can see a lot of movement out of Brandon Royval, frustrating Van. Charles Johnson, he moved perfectly to control range with his large frame. And if we're talking about frames, 5'9" with like a 77-inch reach, that's the same dimensions of Brandon Royval. And they fight differently, but Brandon Royval has even more weapons than Charles Johnson, minus a little bit of power. But that's still a really heavy skeleton, and we know what type of power Brandon Royval hits with, so this is going to be a really good fight. One thing that I noticed about Brandon Royval as I was rewatching his matches is that he is really good at only losing the moments of a fight that don't matter. He creates dead space where even if you do land a few combos at range, he always ends up getting it back, or the most significant moments are going to be things that he produces from his own actions. And you may be ahead in rounds where it's just neutral distance, but I'm telling you, the moments where he's not winning in a fight where he does win, they just don't matter. The Cara France fight was a textbook example of this. As was the Moreno fight too. Even whenever he was losing in the grappling against Brandon Moreno, or even in the stand-up, it just didn't matter because he was able to put the pace right back on Brandon Moreno. In the more significant moments with the takedowns or the activity on the floor or on the feet, it was just with Brandon Royval, so he was able to win the fight this way. This is a large fighter with a grappling package. The only thing that I see putting him at a disadvantage is the fact that his fight style is more geared towards winning decisions than finishing fights, and Joshua Van is a finisher. So if he does see the opportunity to put Brandon Royval out, he will chase it. And Brandon Royval will coast and not burn out his gas tank so that he can make it 25 minutes or 15 or however long the fight is. Now that I'm thinking about it, when's the last time that we've seen Brandon Royval fight in a 15-minute one? It's been a minute, right? He's been main eventing a ton. But yeah, there was this dude named Damon Jackson in Fury FC. I talked about it before whenever I was breaking down this matchup on another video that I had made. Joshua Van, he got choked by this dude. All that guy Damon Jackson had to do was get him off of the cage. We know that Joshua Van's takedown defense is really good. But once he pierced the veil of that first layer of takedown defense, he just melted on the ground like ice cream. I think that if things are consistent with the way that they were back then, and Brandon Royval can get creative to get the fight to the ground, Brandon Royval could probably win this fight pretty easily. And nobody has tested the grappling on Joshua Van just because of a lack of conviction to the takedown, because he is really good at stuffing those shots initially. But if you continue to chain wrestle him, let's see how he does at that point. I wonder. I know that Royval will do anything to secure a takedown on Van, and he likely makes him look like a butter guard.
You made me look like a butter guard.
You pay good?
Huh?
You pay good money?
What, huh?
You pay good money for
what?
For bodyguard. I can be your bodyguard.
Why did I say good guard?
So Royval via round 3 sub is what I'm going to predict in this fight. The next one is going to be a lightweight matchup between Beneil Daruish at number 9 versus Renato Moicano at number 11. Renato Moicano weaseled his way into a title shot, and now he gets to enjoy the benefit of being an ex-title challenger by having your rank protected in the next matchup that you take, which is guaranteed to be within like the top 10. It's like Fortnite, whenever you get on for the first match of the day on ranked and you just get shit on immediately. The same thing is happening to Renato here. He didn't lose any elo from getting darsed by Islam Makhachev. Beneil Daruish is a gift for a guy like Moicano, who probably gets slept by everyone ranked above him except for Mateusz Gamrot and Beneil Daruish. So, Merry Christmas, Renato Moicano. You get to fight one of the two guys who doesn't chin you brutally. Renato taking this matchup for himself instead of letting a young up-and-comer get it like Hoofy, I think that it's greedy and selfish. But I mean, he has to eat too, you know? But there's a lot of dudes who are outside of the ranking or like top 15, and they need to take these. Bro, lightweight, it's low-key full of geezers. And it was cool 5 years ago whenever they were 5 years younger, all of these cats, but we're seeing it now. The main event is the turning over of hands, the passing of torches. We need to see this happen on all levels in this division and in the sport, to be honest. I think that will be what revitalizes MMA, is to get a new class of young talent to replace the dudes that we've been watching for the last however long. Beneil Daruish has taken some super necessary time off after getting sent to hang out at the River Styx by Charles and Armin, each within the same 6 months in 2023. I think he got knocked out once by Charles in July, and he got knocked out by Armin in December, which is a bummer for him. And I'm glad that he took this time off. But even though it's been nearly 2 years since Daruish's last fight, Kevin Lee has proven that the chin never heals. So once that gets cracked, you're done for. The best thing that Daruish could hope for would be to have a fight like Court McGee had with Chiesa, where he graciously loses a decision where nothing happens. But realistically, if this is the grappler-grappler matchup that I think it is, where they're going to neutralize each other on the ground, I think that they will actually try grappling, because it didn't matter to Beneil Daruish that Gamrot was good at grappling, because he still tried to take him down. He got some control too, but that was after the striking was working for him. Beneil Daruish's striking, he didn't demonstrate any of it in his last 2 fights, but against Gamrot it looked alright. And then Renato Moicano has had some good striking performances in the past. His best striking performance was probably against Brian Ortega, even though he did end up losing that fight. He has some okay hands. Renato Moicano is a master of game planning, though. Beneil Daruish is one of the more winnable fights at 155, especially within the top 10 of these rankings. I think that both of these fighters would be most optimally used by being fed to younglings, since they sit at 9 and 11 rankings. If Benny wins this fight, I think that there should be no movement and that they should just keep their rankings. If Moicano wins, then they should just switch. And just think about it, neither of these guys probably beat Mauricio Hufi or Chase Hooper, who are still unranked, both of them. So, Renato Moicano via decision is what I'm thinking. Even Paddy washes both of these guys. The co-main event is Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France. Pantoja is so good. I just rewatched his fight with Royval, and he's a very special fighter. Pantoja is a guy, I talked about dudes who have fight styles that are more geared towards decision. I think that he has worked out a formula. I was going to say that I don't think it's any fault of his own that he goes to the decision. This guy knows how to win championship fights, and he's better at doing it than pretty much any champion who holds a belt. Because this guy has been champion forever. Quietly in the background, this dude has been going on an insane run in flyweight. With modern MMA considered, we need to hold those resumes, him and Demetrius Johnson, side by side to see who has the better defenses. Because we know what type of talent we have in the UFC at the current moment. We know how Tim Elliott measures up against modern talent, and we know that Ray Borg couldn't compete with any of these guys, so we gotta hold up these resumes eventually, especially if he does win this fight. The reason why Pantoja is so good at winning decisions is because he never gets rocked, and he takes you down once per round. The last people to beat Pantoja by decision, think about this. It was Figueiredo in 2019, which is a whole 6 years ago, and Figueiredo's always been a bantamweight, and Askar Askarov in 2020. And this is a shared opponent of Kai Kara-France and Alexandre. And Kai Kara-France low-key robbed Askar Askarov in that fight. And rewatching those matches honestly makes me think that Muhammad Mokaev could probably be champion of this division. That's the reason why they kicked him out, is because they knew that they let him stay, he would end up running things and they wouldn't be able to tell him what to do. In Kai Kara-France's fight, he gets wrestled out of necessity since he is so dangerous on the feet. In neutral spaces, Kai hits fighters with shots that almost finish them, and so they hurry to start wrestling afterwards. But another thing to note is that you can catch Kai Kara-France. He has this ability to be caught with weird stuff. There's only 2 instances that come to mind immediately. Brandon Moreno catching him with that liver shot. It was a toe that landed right on his liver. Brandon Moreno probably did it on accident. I mean, he threw the kick, so it was purposeful, but I'm not sure he meant for it to cause as much damage as it actually did. Kai Kara-France as well, he was dropped and subbed by Brandon Royval. I think it was the spinning elbow that I was talking about before. You can catch him. If you're weird and you time it right, you can set up something crazy and you can catch him. Alexandre Pantoja may pull out a forbidden technique on Kai Kara-France he's never used in one of his fights before, just because he knows that if it's unorthodox enough, it just might work. The thing that assures me in Pantoja's victory is knowing that he isn't the type of guy who's fighting with fan narratives. And he isn't trying to have a striking battle to be more liked. People were grilling him for having boring fights and being like, oh great, we get to watch Pantoja on another main event, and he's gonna have a wrestling decision. And we're not looking closely enough, and then you do watch a fight closely of his, and it looks like a Jet Li movie, and you're like, whoa, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. But it's a formula. He's going to come out and he's going to do the same thing every time, and it's going to work every single time. And fitting into this formula is Kai Kara-France, who is dangerous unless you grapple him, and he's easy to control once he's down on the ground. So he's a perfect guy for Pantoja to beat with this style. And for as dangerous as Kai is in the striking, he isn't a significantly larger threat than Alexandre is on the feet. And like, Pantoja is going to be his problem whenever all things are considered. I don't think that Pantoja is going to show an insane amount or any respect to Kai Kara-France in the early going of this. And he may hit a crazy walk down like Alex Perez. And if he needs to shoot, he will. But he's just going to try to walk right through him. And Pantoja, I'm so excited to watch him fight. He's got the cool customs now too. You got some sweet customs right as I released the list, man. They give him the best customs. I would have put him at number 1 because he had the best ones. Ultimately, I think that KKF was the right guy to give this title shot to, especially since Manel Kape is out and we have to rush to make a number 1 contender fight for this division because of that. Let Kai Kara-France fight for this title. I still don't think that he beats Pantoja. Pantoja is going to win by a decision or a late sub. Watch out for that too. So that's going to take us on to the main event. The main event is going to be Ilia Topuria at number 3 versus Charles Oliveira at number 2. Ilia, he's never lied to us. He said he'd sleep Volk. We called his bluff, and he did it. He said he'd do the same thing to Max. We called his bluff. Surely he's not going to knock out Max, though, right? Justin Gaethje, he dropped Max. Dustin Poirier might have dropped Max at one time, but nobody's like cleanly dropped Max before. We don't see this guy get hurt or rocked in his fights. He's fought every single boxer at 145 and hasn't been rocked. Arnold Allen, Calvin Kattar, the Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez, Volk. He did get hit hard a few times, but he never chicken danced, I don't think, in any of those Volk fights. Ilia Topuria removed Max Holloway's lower mandible like one of those classroom skeletons that just hangs out at the front of your chemistry classroom. And Charles, he's battling washed allegations after a decision loss to Arman, where he got dominated, and a very forgettable rematch with Chandler that I bet you guys forgot about before I even just brought it up right now. It's my belief that Charles can't produce the same level of violence that he was able to in 2022. That was before getting subbed by Islam in that year in October. And I think he's been completely neutered after he got dominated by Arman like that. Because what the hell was that Chandler rematch, dude? The fact that he didn't finish that fight is so insane to me. The fact that he gave Chandler an opportunity to win at the very end is like, what are you doing, man? You should have never took that rematch, because I said it in the predictions. He couldn't beat that guy any better than he did the first time. And he did it a lot worse in the second, and it makes him look a lot worse as a fighter to me. So you have a guy like Charles Oliveira, who was likely never going to touch the belt for as long as Islam was still champion. He's gatekeeping one of the craziest divisions ever. He's challenging the most powerful smaller weight class fighter in the promotion's history. And Charles Oliveira's never had the best durability in his fights, and he's displayed this over and over and over again. Poirier, Chandler, Gaethje, they all dropped Charles in the first rounds of their fights. And based off of MMA math, which I constantly bring up and then say doesn't make any sense, these fighters all hit about half as hard as Ilia Topuria. Justin Gaethje landed his flesh shots for 25 minutes on the chin of Max Holloway. And granted, not a lot of them did land that weren't slipped or rolled, but a few of them did get through. And a shot that dropped Max Holloway out of Justin Gaethje wasn't enough to put him out. Ilia Topuria knocked out Max Holloway in a fraction of the time, and it was a clean KO. It doesn't make sense how Ilia Topuria is able to do the things that he is able to do, but he still does them. And I think that Charles is going to get Islam'd again. And what I mean by that is I think that he's going to be rocked, and that he's going to instinctively pull guard out of the assumption that Ilia will not chase, because he's going to call Topuria's bluff and be like, you know, I'm hurt right now. My brain is shaking inside of my head like a racquetball. But what if I lay on my back and this guy was lying about his grappling credentials? Yeah, he's probably lying. And so he's going to pull guard and do that thing where he's laying like this. And Ilia Topuria is going to chase right into that guard. And he's going to stack him and land some more damage and get him to turn over and shell. And then he can just do whatever he wants from there. Ilya's a scientist. And like listening to him discuss his thoughts while fighting these elite strikers is amazing because of how much and how little he thinks at the same time. I saw this video breaking down comms, like call-outs that his brother was making towards him in the Max Holloway fight, and he was discussing how he was noticing that Max Holloway, his leg was getting damaged from the low kicks, and so whenever he would move straight backwards, he would switch stances, but his legs would go over themselves, so if he could land the straight punch, he wouldn't have space to switch stances, and he like would trip. And so he like timed that in his head, and the spacing was perfect. And the timing was perfect. And this was an interview where he was talking about this. So they weren't looking at the fight footage. And he broke it down perfectly. And they put the footage over the interview where he was talking about when the perfect moment to strike was. You would have thought he knocked out Max Holloway hundreds of times. The way that he just was able to just talk about it. And just be like, yeah, this is how you do it. And right here, this is where you punch him so that he gets knocked out. Look. Yeah, right there. And like, I just watch it and I'm just in sheer amazement every time. Oh, he better watch out. Make sure he doesn't punch himself out. And then he just goes to sleep, dude. This is one of the most ice cold clips in MMA history, bro. We gotta put some respect on this dude's name. And I know that we don't like him because he keeps on getting these matches with our favorite fighters, but how many of these guys does he need to knock out before he becomes your favorite fighter or mine, bro, at this point? Alex Pereira needed to do significantly less before we were like, oh yeah, we all like this guy. Ilia Topuria is busting his ass to give us historical moments in this sport. And we're just kind of scoffing at it because we just don't like it. I already put the belt on Ilia Topuria because I'm that confident that he wins it. Ilia probably has like 12 different contingency plans for how he could finish this fight, and he will adapt his strategy on the way that Oliveira approaches. But Oliveira said that he's just going to come out guns a-blazing and just walk right forward because he's the lion and he's the champ, you know? But let's see how that goes. What we're going to see is a car crash. And ultimately, I think that Up Toro Top Toro is going to be victorious. And he's going to win via round 1 KO. Oh, man. And just saying that and having the prospects of watching it, it's making my palms sweaty. I'm getting like nervous. Even just like imagining the face-offs and stuff, dude. It's just, I can't wait until like Thursday this week whenever they're doing the weigh-ins. We get the final statements of both of them and they're able to look at each other and we get the press conference. Dude, I'm about to cover all of it. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I just want to let you guys know, man, we'll watch this together. But a moment like this one will never happen again. High Muay Thai guard out the early going. Trade punches, left hook lands, they're going to chase into the cage. I used to watch this knockout every single time before I took an exam in college. I wouldn't even look over my notes, man. I would just listen to Tai Escrito, which was the walkout song from this night of Charles Oliveira, and I would just watch this knockout like 2 or 3 times. And I would always make good marks in school, man. I made good grades. This was my method. It never failed me. But yeah, man, it's fun to reminisce, you know? But sometimes it's like Andy looking at his old toys before he goes off to college. It's like, you know, I used to love Buzz Lightyear and Woody, but now I gotta go get some Huzz, man. This is our moment to grow up. The adult thing is to support Ilia Topuria here in this matchup. I feel like we're just kind of chasing these childhood fantasies if we're supporting Charles Oliveira in this fight where we clearly know that he probably doesn't win. Not a 37, 38-year-old Charles Oliveira. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's around that age. So you guys, happy International Fight Week. I'm so happy that I can be on my new PC setup for this year's International Fight Week, making content for you guys, talking about this massive card, this massive fight that will happen. And I'm excited to watch it. I'm going to be so locked in this Saturday. Please do like, comment, and subscribe if you made it to this point of the video. I will catch you fellas in the next one.